Welcome. Thank you for joining us for what is our 7th session here on bands at the UMKC Conservatory during COVID-19. I'm Steve Davis, and I'm here with 4 colleagues that I consider just as amazing as you can find them. We're going to be talking today about preparing auditions, and we know that all of you, students particularly at the conservatory and anyone else that might be watching this online, we know that's very pragmatic and relevant thing to your study on your instruments. And we offer today our most thoughtful commentary on questions that you've provided. But I'll let Joe, my terrific colleague and friend here, start to talk to you about exactly what's happening. Joe?
Thank you, Steve. And I'll introduce our panel, but I'll do it in kind of a broad swoop. They are the best of the best. We've asked them to be on this because not only are they our colleagues at the conservatory, but they have done everything from chamber music to solo performing, orchestral performing in every arena imaginable. And yet they have now dedicated their lives to being servants to our students at the conservatory. And we couldn't be more delighted to have you on the panel. And I'm just going to introduce you and have to say a quick hello to anybody that may be tuning that's not a conservatory student. So Celeste Johnson is our oboe professor, Jody Davis, our trombone professor, and Marty Hackelman is our horn professor. And so to our panel, thank you again for your time and wisdom that you get to share with us today. We're so delighted. The students in this experience number over 120, and they've all submitted questions relating to this topic, and we chose the top questions that came to the surface. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight. And we'll just go through them. Steve will start, and then as you each have something to offer, feel free to jump in as you feel appropriate. So glad to have you all. Steve.
I always like to ask this question when I talk to gurus on instruments and people that are panelists for auditions. What is it that you listen for as a panelist? And everyone's all over different places on this. Celeste, you want to start with what you focus on?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that's important when you're thinking about taking an audition in relation to that is that you cannot control what the people listening think. And I think that as a panelist, the first thing I listen for are rhythm and pitch. And those are the non-negotiables. Those are not negotiable. That is not up for grabs. Everything else is totally subjective and would be subject to different opinions and different ways of thinking, style, tone, vibrato. All of these different things are completely subjective. And so I think that if you're really focusing on taking an audition, rhythm and pitch are first and foremost, and then everything else you need to take care of as well. But those are the things that are just sort of at the top of my list.
Jody?
I would agree. You can't control what they're listening for on the panel, but I think the fundamental things have to be in place. And we're not maybe only talking about orchestral auditions, but I assume many of you are thinking in terms of orchestra or large ensemble types of auditions. So the fundamental things have to be in place, or it's just, next. Really, I mean, it's a brutal thing, but it has to be there all the time. Time and rhythm, pitch, tone, quality, and they're going to be trying to ascertain whether or not that's going to fit in, your sound is going to fit in, and so forth. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more later. And then, of course, the correct style for the piece. And then, all other things equal, let's say then it's come down to the finalists. Then it's always an assumption that the finalists will all have those things in place. And then it's like that person that just has that something extra special going for them. Every time I've heard somebody winning an audition, like Joe Lefevre here in Kansas City, all the guys said, yeah, he played everything, but then he was just so musical. And we could tell he was going to be so flexible, and he was so awesome. So there's that something extra.
Marty?
I totally agree with everything you're saying. There's a couple other important things as an auditionee that you have to think about. And part of it is perspective. What are you auditioning for? Is it a section or a principal? Okay. And you got to think of it from the viewpoint, especially as a live audition. Okay. Well, let's just talking about live auditions. Tape things are like whatever. But let's just talk about a live audition. It's really important. Yes, you hit all the notes and the style is basically there. If you've just listened to this excerpt for 80 times, you're, as a panel, trying to not lose your mind. if somebody misses a note or not a beautiful sound, you click out and you go back to your magazine. Okay, so you don't want that to happen. So it's really important as an auditionee, have all the food groups in place. First impressions mean everything. If you come out with a beautiful sound and say something special, doesn't have to be off the wall, but something unique that's interesting, you took a chance, it worked, that panel just woke up. And now you're on the A list. Until you mess it up, you are a winner. You see what I mean? By that first impression. So it's really important that you make sure you try to find a way. And if it's just playing a Mozart concerto, fine. Do something special. So they sit up and say, this person's trying to be something instead of just hitting the notes. So it's really important that you come from that perspective. So first impressions are really, really important. And maintain that attitude that way. Because if it's an orchestral thing, the other thing you're looking for, like, yes, this person won't make my life miserable because they can hit the notes and play in tune. Great. Now, I want them, they're going to be good enough to make me sound better, okay, on a professional level, artistically. Now, the other thing that's a little frustrating is, of course, we don't know about personality. So when the screen comes down, you know, it's better if you probably don't have a mohawk. I'm just saying. Even though you might want to have a mohawk, don't. You have to dress a suit and tie. So all these things have to be considered in the package. And the last thing I'd like to say about it is you can play a perfect audition. At best, that's 50% of winning. Because like Celeste said, and Jody said, there's so many things you can't control. And don't take it personally. Just because you've lost 10 auditions, Mother Nature doesn't think you deserve the next one any different. It's a coin toss every time.
So that leads really well to it's kind of a multi-part question, but the students are like, they've heard different theories of preparation. Like, how do you prepare to be successful for an audition? And you do it and you do it. And how do you avoid getting burned out? What kind of strategies do you have for your students in that regard to prepare and then to make sure to keep going and not get burned out? We'll start with you, Jody, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm just going to say one thing to piggyback on what Marty said. My teacher at Indiana always used to get so upset with us if we got up in studio class or anything, or an audition prep, mock audition, and if you got up and you played a crappy tuning note, or you're like, you want to test the hall and play two notes, he'd say, they've already made a decision about you. Because some people get out there, they play well, but then they go, you know, he said, you've played one note and they've decided, you know, that's a bad sound, or they're being careless or something. So that's something. Or if you walk out and you haven't had a chance to tune with the piano and you need to play with the piano, then don't play anything really complicated. Just play something, play your most beautiful B flat that you've got. You can test the hall with that. That's enough. But yeah. So I want to say that. I think in preparation for auditions, you have to balance your practice so that you're not just practicing excerpts for 6 months, or you're not just playing whatever the thing is you're auditioning on. I try to tell my students to balance their solo and their study materials in addition to excerpts. And this is just my opinion, but I always felt like when I was really actively preparing orchestra auditions, if I weren't also playing Bordoni etudes or solos or things, I kind of lost some flexibility somehow. Just the ability to kind of get around on the horn. So do that, and play chamber music with other people, and rotate your excerpts. Milt Stevens, who used to be principal trombone in the National Symphonies, passed away now, but he had a really well organized list of excerpts, and he rotated them. He had a long list and a short list, but if you went through this rotation, you played everything every week, so nothing got rusty. So that's one thing you can do, is rotate. I suggest you mix up the order of things on your excerpt list of the things you know you have to play in an audition, so that you can shift from style to style easily. Like, you might play all 5 in the prelim and play Bolero last sometimes. Ralph Sauer used to go, why do trombone players get in the audition and go, oh my God, Bolero? It's like, was that a surprise? Like you didn't know you were going to have to play that, but maybe write them down, throw them in a hat, and play them in a different order. Record yourself. because a lot of times we can fix our own problems. Oh, if I just heard that, well, I could have fixed that. I didn't have to wait a week for my teacher to tell me that that's out of tune or a wrong note or something. And then finally, play for others who are better than you.
That's good advice. Good advice. Celeste?
Yeah, so I would like to echo what Jody is saying too, in maintaining fundamentals. And I have found that the times when I've been playing the best in my life is when I'm spending an hour a day on fundamentals. And literally the first thing I would do for an hour is fundamentals. And I think that's easy to skip over because we think I need to practice Tombeau and La Scala di Seta and all the Mozart concerto. But if you don't have good fundamentals, you're not going to be able to do any of that at a really, really high level. So I think that's really, really important. Being self-reflective and self-critical in a maybe constructive is a better word, constructive with yourself. When I was taking a lot of orchestra auditions when I was in grad school, I would actually keep a notebook of my auditions. And so I would leave the audition, and whether I advanced or didn't advance, I thought, well, I just spent a ton of money and a ton of time and a ton of effort, and none of which I had any of. And so it was like using all my energy and all my resources to try and do something. And I thought, well, I better walk away from this experience with something. And so in order to, rather than getting beaten down by the process and getting frustrated and burnt out, I used it as a way to propel myself forward to the next one. And so I had a notebook and I would take notes and I would write down, I had the audition list, you know, whatever was on that audition, whether it went well or did not. And sometimes I would feel like I didn't play well and I would advance. And other times I would feel like, yeah, I nailed that. And then I didn't advance and I went home. So regardless of that, because you can't control that, we've already covered that, I would take notes and say, my Mozart concerto, what went well and what do I need to go home and work on? And so that really motivated me to work and practice more and improve through the process rather than get burnt out by it, and to feel somehow inspired by taking an audition, even if I didn't win. And just as a side note, nobody wins everything. Nobody wins everything.
You know, I love the reflective practice you mentioned, and that you just affirmed yet again Marty's point that, you know, you may hit it all and it just doesn't seem to be that they don't pick you. That's really good.
Right.
Marty, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, and also too, it's mystifying. It's like why they didn't pick me. It could be simply style. It could be infighting in the committee. The conductor wants his brother there. You know, all sorts of things that are just you can't control at all. So yeah, I think a good point. Just to reiterate some stuff. Excerpt chops really get in the way a lot. So make sure that you integrate your quality playing. Don't just dwell on the little things, because those little excerpts, no matter how long they are and short they are, they're little tiny things. So your air, your energy, your focus, your mentality, your fear starts to implode and get to be like a little dark black star in your musical soul. So make sure you keep it open. Put it, and then also too, as you're practicing, like doing the fundamentals and like Celeste is saying, etc. In the middle of, you know, even at the end of a study, put in, you know, a couple excerpts. Just throw them in there. You know, just so it's all just in. For me, all the years I did it, I had a vast majority of stuff that I just sort of threw in whenever. That I played it every day for when, I don't know, in the routine, whatever. So make sure that the excerpts get into the fabric of your instrument, not exclusive for auditions. Yeah, sure, some excerpts are going to be, but everybody has probably a dozen to 15 excerpts that you should be able to pull out of a hat. And speaking of, that's what you should do. Do that thing when you're getting down to it, especially. The other thing that happens sometimes is you peak too soon. And then you start nitpicking yourself, not improving. You're actually tearing yourself down because you're doing it too critically instead of spontaneously. So make sure that once you get to that point, just maintain. The best way to do that for me, in my experience and what I taught students, was like, if you can, once a day, but at least, let's say, without 2 weeks out, do a little mock audition, and let's pick a time like 2 o'clock. You're going to do it. Sometimes it's just for yourself, ideally even one person. You're going to go into a room at 2 o'clock, you're going to play 5 excerpts, but you're picked out of a hat, like you don't know what you're going to play. And you just do that oftentimes, so you're just cold cocking yourself, like, I don't know what's going to happen, and you're surprising yourself, and you just get used to doing that. So that really helps a lot to calm the fear. But be careful, don't you over practice. Once you feel like you got them down, you want to polish them, you want to get them familiar, but don't be too critical once you get to a certain point, like, this seems pretty good, because as you said, when you get to the audition, there's some people are going to, no matter what you do, it's like, nope. I mean, I can't, as like Celeste said, you can't count the times I've gone to auditions like, I nailed that, and then like, what? And then you cough, it wasn't so good, and they said, oh yeah, you're going on, so you never know. You just never know. So don't get too invested physically or emotionally in the process. It is important, and the older you get and the closer you get to the graduating, you're scared, it gets more desperate, and you become, but don't let it, because that's not going to help you.
I can piggyback on this before we go to the next question. No one mentioned how to learn an excerpt. So do you listen to recordings? How does someone start from scratch? Primary, like, how does it get into the ear? Besides, obviously we have to have good fundamentals, good tones, good integrity, but are there ways that you unpack from the very beginning with a person that, an incoming freshman might know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll mention a couple of things. It depends, like, what age you are. If you're a graduate student, or fourth year even, and you're going on to pre-performance, you should have gotten most of the basics, unless there's some off-the-wall things. So a lot of it comes down to, like, if you're a performance major in a university or conservatory or something, you have to have already done that. I mean, honestly, I would have thought that anybody listening to this would have been listening to recordings. I mean, like in our days, we didn't have that luxury. You went to the record store and bought something, and then you hopefully went to the library and found a score. That was it. So yes, you have to be familiar in context. The other thing is, and really important to help you learn the excerpts, is don't learn them as a horn part or an oboe part or trombone part. Listen to the context of what it is, so you really hear the whole piece. You know the piece, because as all of us know, learning something by ourselves and then going and playing it in the ensemble, it turns into something totally different. So make sure that you don't just learn your part.
Anyone, Jody or Celeste, you want to add on to that just from the basics? Like, we might have a high school student on here that doesn't even know what the word excerpt means. So I don't know if anyone wants to piggyback on that at all.
Sure. I kind of approach excerpts differently depending on the goals of the student. But I think even if a student figures they'll never play in an orchestra, first I say, you don't know that. You might be in a community where you have the opportunity to do that. But I want all my students to be educated trombonists, so that they can sit in a room full of other brass players and speak intelligently about what it's like to try to play bolero, or what it's like to, not to try, but to succeed in playing bolero. Or there are some excerpts that anybody can play, that horn and clarinet, trombone solo in the Saint-Saëns organ symphony. Anybody can play that. It's right in the staff, but it's on a lot of auditions. So sometimes I just start, it's kind of more, I'm just educating you as a trombonist, so you know what a trombonist does. And then we kind of go from there. But definitely, I mean, there's really no excuse with all this stuff that's online now. They do everything but practice it for you. They give you the excerpt, they highlight the score as the recording is going along. I mean, so to really get to know the excerpts, so that whether it's a solo or it's a section thing. Some excerpts go in and out of, the Mahler 3 solo is the first solo is by itself, but then do you know where the section joins in with you? This is where you can let the others help you, and then, so as Marty said, knowing the context of the excerpts, but also allowing people who might not be taking a lot of orchestra auditions to at least play some excerpts and be well educated as trombone players.
Celeste, anything on that topic for maybe younger students?
Sure. I think that knowing what the excerpts are, what are the big solos that are commonly asked for, and just sort of getting familiar with those, that any, oboe teacher at a university can tell you what the common excerpts are if you're, or on your instrument. And then also, I think a big mistake for really young players, when like a freshman just learning La Tomba do Couperin for the first time, don't play it up to tempo when you're first learning, because if you learn a wrong note or messy technique, it will follow you for 20 years. So learn it well and then you can speed things up. So just that's more of like if you're just starting to learn excerpts or you're just getting your feet wet with these orchestral pieces. And then a lot of times I'll make sure that students have listened, as Marty and Jody have mentioned as well, listening for the context, because if you step on the flute player's solo, they're going to cut you from the audition. So if there's a rest where there's a flute solo, the flute player is singing it in their head. So the oboist needs to sing it in their head as well while they're playing and knowing what's happening in the rest of the orchestra, because you can tell by how you play the excerpts if you know the rest of the orchestral part.
How many excerpts ish do you all work on with your students, if you had to guess a number? And I know that's probably impossible, but does anybody just want to throw a number out like that?
Well, it depends. As I said, it depends if it's a freshman or a fourth year or grad. I actually have lists that are sort of built around those people. So a freshman, they want to come in and be they don't have much experience from high school. I would say, let's say they don't have much experience. I would say, 6 or 8 off the top of my head, that we'd start looking at. But then as time goes on, we expand that a lot. And for grads, it's you should know all this stuff. So it's pretty flexible. But there's each of our instruments has, a definitive 25 things that will show up on excerpts. And sometimes the same piece might not have this, or they'll throw some tutti thing in or whatever from the same piece. But, it's not. It totally depends on the age of the person, the experience, in my opinion.
Jody or Celeste, anything on that?
Just to kind of back up a little bit to people who can't, maybe are not ready to play all the toughest excerpts. I think it's important to go incrementally, like to pick Bolero as an example. Maybe you can get within a whole step of the top note, but instead of trying to squeak it out, maybe you can work out and develop bad habits. You can just move it down, start it down a third or a fourth, and then just go up by half steps till you get there. And not, there's certain excerpts that would probably do more harm than good if you tried to do them if they were way out of your grasp.
We have a couple high school bands programs that are watching these as well. And this might be the first time you even heard the word excerpt. An excerpt is exactly what you think it is. It's just a small segment of a piece that's on the instrument, either historically or relevant to what's happening today. And these are things that you have to 10 measures, 12 measures, 20 measures, 200 measures if it's an exposition or a concerto, but they're things that players have to play when they're trying to win a job in the symphony orchestra that's near your town or anywhere across the world. So that's the process by which this is, in case you're younger and don't know. What do you advise your students? I've witnessed this here in my 15 years on the faculty. Some students can deal with the rejection, some students cannot. Some students get 15 no's before they get a yes. Some people get it the first time. The people that might have to work for the 15th or 20th time, how do you help them get through that? What are things that you help them survive in their inner brains just so they don't cave? What are some of the things? Celeste?
Yeah, I have a friend who plays the oboe, and he took 56 auditions before he won one. And I tell that story and I just sort of, from even a very young age, I'll tell students that want to be in performance that sometimes it takes audition number 57. And you have to be in it for the long haul and pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And some people win their second or third audition right out of school, and some people it's number 57. And I will quote my teacher from Eastman, Richard Kilmer. He said, "It's not always the best oboists that win jobs. It's the ones that don't quit."
Jody?
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, I have colleagues who, they were literally kind of under pressure because I've taken so many auditions. I'm kind of on my last dime here. That's not always the best place to be in. It's easier to win when you've already got a job. But again, yeah, stick with it. I would say every time you take an audition, like Celeste mentioned, with taking notes, see if you can identify for yourself what you can do differently the next time to stick with it, so that it doesn't always just become a rejection every time. you won't get comments most of the time. A lot of students ask, "Can I get comments?" I get, no, they're not gonna give you comments. You know, there are 60 people here. They're not gonna write comments for everybody. So you probably won't get comments most of the time. I'm gonna just kind of, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I'm gonna be a little bit real world here with you, because I think you all know about how many jobs are open out there sometimes. Like if you play tuba, you know, or oboe. I mean, you know, there aren't that many jobs that are open. So you have to really be prepared and try not to get discouraged, but also make sure you're doing your best every day to prepare and get better. Like, ask yourself every day, even if it's just a tiny little thing, did I do something to move myself forward today? I was discouraged yesterday, you know, today I feel like backing over the trombone with my car, but I'm going to do one thing, you know, I'm going to do one thing today to move me forward. And it might be something in fundamentals or whatever, but, and take a real look at your readiness level. And there are many different opportunities and many different kinds of groups. It's not all like I'm auditioning for the New York Philharmonic or the Philadelphia Orchestra. There are many other kinds of regional and community and those kinds of things. Not that anybody doesn't hold those experiences just as important. Not that you don't want to play as well, but sometimes they aren't going to be quite as competitive. So don't lock yourself into it's the New York Philharmonic or nothing. There are many ways to make a living, and there are many ways for you to express yourself and be valued as a musician. So try to make yourself flexible so that you can do a lot of different things, and just try to stay at it. I have a colleague, I won't name who he is or what instrument he plays, but please don't take this as a discouraging thing, but he says, I do my best to try to discourage my students from doing this. And then if they just know they have to do it, I'm speaking specifically orchestra auditions. But then if they say, I am going to do it, I have to do it, I love music, I love what I'm doing, I can't live without it, he says, then I go, okay, let's go. Let's work on it. So just realize that there are people like that in every audition. They're there to win. They're there because they can't imagine their life without it. And if you're not quite that serious about it in your prep and stuff, then you're not going to be competitive. So kind of take a look at yourself with that. And I hope that's not discouraging, but it's very competitive. And people blossom at different points in their careers, in their lives. You know, sometimes somebody comes in as a freshman and boy, they have a long ways to go, but in 4 years, they're playing way better than some grad student that came in and didn't work. So.
Sorry, Jody, I thought you were done. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, all these things are totally relevant. I mean, my teacher, when I took up the horn in earnest at 16, I really wanted to go after it, and he constantly, in his lessons, he taught me well, but he was constantly saying how bad orchestra is and what a bad situation is and all this stuff. And years later, when I would visit him, I visited him after I had gotten a job for a while, and I asked him why, and he basically said exactly what Jody said. He said, I thought if I can try to talk you out of as best you can and you still wanted to do it, you would at least survive. And so there's a couple other small things too. I mean, it depends on how you approach to give advice about losing 50 times or 5 times, whatever. If you're a student, then you have to give them the mental attitude of like, okay, relax a little bit, you know, just learn how to accept. If you're out of school and you're desperate and you're feeling like I've done this 20 times, maybe I'm not good enough. I always approach myself, and I teach my students, and it's definitely for audition preparation and just every day. Your only job is to be slightly better than yesterday, but not as good as tomorrow. That's it. And that's on your personal life, on your music, and also your audition preparation. Over this 20 times, do I feel more comfortable playing Ein Heldenleben, or am I more scared? So you got to make sure that you're turning it around and becoming, regardless of its outcome, you becoming less intimidated by the situation. The other thing is, after you're out of school, if you're working towards and you're graduating, etc., make sure you have a life structure, like Celeste was saying and Jody. there's all sorts of ways to make a living still playing your instrument. Maybe not in New York Philharmonic, like you said, but there's ways to do it between teaching and some playing regional orchestras, whatever, until you might land a bigger gig. Make sure you think forward about, I can get my little life in line so I can take these auditions without feeling like I'm at the end of the rope. So you might be working part-time here and teaching a little over here, playing a little orchestra here, but you've got a nest egg, so it's not the end of the world. So make sure you think ahead for that. Those things don't automatically happen. It's really, really important that you do that. So in general, just, are you feeling more comfortable after the 20th failure? I mean, sure, there's some, you can look back, like, you know, you were saying, Celeste was saying, you make notes and think, yeah, that was just not off, that was my best day. And then other times when it was like, okay, well, something else would happen. So, but just make sure that you're feeling more comfortable and familiar. And the longer you put your audition material and mentality into the fabric of your existence for your instrument. I mean, our instruments are very intimate things, which reason we pick them up is because they are very intimate. Okay? Now, unfortunately, using the instruments is anything but intimate. It's extroverted to the extreme. So there's a bit of a irony there. So, but we need to figure out, like, okay, I got to get used to my instrument, me and my instrument feeling good and strong, and then I can just put it out there with confidence, and hopefully it will resonate with somebody. So, and get used to, like, not pleasing everybody all the time. So anyway, it's a long game, like you were saying. It's a long haul. It's the people who keep showing up, and we all know those people. And it's really important that you even though you might not, if you're even starting, you know, think that eventually I'm going to have to make sure I have that kind of metal and steel within my playing.
Now we have, you know, we'll have people from our studios and our population looking, but like Steve said, we'll probably have some younger students looking on at this panel discussion. And so this question comes up almost all the time with any panel you talk about regarding audition, performance, it doesn't matter. We're putting ourselves out there, as you said, Marty, with an inanimate object, trying to make something beautiful. And some people can cope with anxiety and nerves, and some people can't. And everybody has a way or has a story to discuss that, oh, I don't get nervous, or I got over it this way, or here's what I advise my students. And I'm just curious, Celeste, if you might share, and then we'll try Marty and Jody. Just what advice or personal experiences do you have that may have helped, or maybe you still get nervous, we just don't see it?
Yeah, so I actually took audition lessons with a trumpet player, and Bill Williams was his name, and he worked with Don Green, who wrote the Performance and Audition Success books, and so he had a background in psychology. And I was taking auditions. I was halfway through my master's at Eastman, and it was not going well. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I mean, I was sitting here going, what do I do? And I, on this weird chance, kind of met him at a clinic that he was presenting, the 1-hour clinic. And he lived in New York City. And I went to him and I said, can I come take lessons with you? And he said, yes. And it was $100 an hour. And this was like 20 years ago. And I was waiting tables and didn't have $100 an hour to pay, but I couldn't afford not to do it. And so I will just try and give a brief synopsis of what he taught me, because it was after I took lessons with Bill Williams on performance anxiety and the mental focus needed to audition or perform. It applies to both. And learning to focus your mind in such a way that you are so prepared for that situation mentally that you can go and bring your best playing to an audition or performance. So one of the things that Bill taught me was focusing. And he literally said, do not start an audition until you can hear the beginning of that, say, Beethoven 3 in your head. And in your mind, you hear the most beautiful, amazing oboist playing Beethoven 3 in the right tempo that you want in the orchestra. And do not start until your mind is there. And taking the time to do that, and not only in the audition room, because if you're only doing it in the audition room, well, you're just going to be nervous. It's not going to work. You have to practice focusing in between excerpts and getting your mind from Beethoven to Mahler to Mozart. These are all very different pieces and composers and types and styles of playing. And so by doing that, it helped me to get in a place where I would start practicing mentally. So that is the big takeaway from Bill Williams, my $100 an hour lessons in 2003. And you know, it was amazing, the change. And it was after that time, and I was driving to New York City, which is not close to Rochester. That's about a 6-hour drive. I was driving 6 hours each way, staying with a friend I met at a festival, and taking a lesson and then driving back home the next day. And it was when I started doing these focusing exercises and practicing them in my daily practice, practicing mentally, doing mock auditions, and preparing myself mentally. I could play the oboe. Bill Williams did not teach me to play the oboe. Bill Williams taught me how to play the oboe well under pressure. And so by doing that, it just helped tremendously. But you have to practice it. You can't just walk into the audition room and do it only at the auditions or only in the performances. So that's been extraordinarily helpful to me.
Good, and I think we can maybe even put a link to his book in the YouTube. Marty?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to you're right, to be thinking positively and clearly before each thing happens. And the thing is, a lot of times everybody says, "Oh, I got to think ahead," but it's usually, how many times do we naturally think like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to play this, and I rock over there at B. I'm going to kill. I love that lick there." It's never that. Most of the time, naturally, thinking ahead is fear. Oh, I hope I have the chops for that note today. Oh, that's a problem there, that rhythm. I hope I don't get lost. It spins in a negative way. And it's like seeing the ball go through the hoop or looking at the stripe on the road. You got to pay attention to. So definitely what Celeste is saying, pick your excerpt, pick how it sounds, pick the rhythm. For instance, like there's always, if it's a rhythm thing, then there's always some little part of the excerpt that will dictate the right rhythm. It'll only be played with the right tempo. But be mentally engaged before you do that, for sure. So it's really important. College people going in to play professional auditions, they say, what about drugs?
Okay. So you mean like beta blockers?
Beta blockers, yeah. You need to function without assistance in drugs, in my opinion. If you can't, then perhaps you're in the wrong profession on a normal basis. Auditions are not normal on a professional level oftentimes. And so that was the only time I said, because unfortunately the truth is, if you've got 50 people, if the person before you played with an enhancing beta blocker and didn't get nervous and did well, and you out of pride messed up, who's the only loser? It's unfortunate, but it's true. So in an audition procedure, if you can't play it fairly consistently without. Now, I agree, you should be able to. Ideally, yes, that's what you're aiming for. But for those expensive 15 minutes, just do what needs to be done. Not on a daily basis, I never recommend it. And you don't need it on a daily basis. Let's face it, once you're in rehearsals and stuff like that, most people can do without. But for an audition, and so, I mean, I oftentimes would take it for auditions only because they were so rare. And the other thing, the mentality of the audition, especially at the professional level, is the exact opposite of what we experience every day. Every time we walk on stage, or even in rehearsal, everybody's there like, they want to hear beauty. They want to be inspired. They want to love what they're going to hear. They paid money for it. They're thinking positively, emotionally. Exact opposite for an audition. Oh, everybody's sitting there. You got 10 minutes. Just how bad are you? And that's what their mentality is. So you've got to make sure that you turn that around, with all the things we're talking about. So I don't know if it's jumping the shark here with the drug thing, but I mean, on professional level, I get blowback from that all the time, and I agree totally. Although the caveat is, my last audition, and when I won the National Symphony in 2000, I told myself that's the last audition I'm going to do because that's a good enough gig. I was 50 years old, so that was it. I closed the excerpt book, and I said, I'll never open this book again. And I have it. I still have the book. And then a year later, I had a physical in D.C., and the doctor said, Marty, your blood pressure is pretty high. I said, really? Oh, I didn't know that. So he says, yeah, it's pretty high. You need to take these Inderol. I said, oh, I have experience with Inderol. You do? He says, yeah, I took it for, occasionally for auditions and stuff. Oh. Well, how much are you taking? I said, well, maybe 10 milligrams. He said, that wouldn't touch you in 1,000 years. For 4 years, I had to take 100 milligrams a day of Inderol to get my blood pressure down. He said the 10 milligrams would not have made any difference for your heart rate at that audition. It was all psychological.
Wow. So
there's that, which was entertaining. I said, oh. But anyway, that's just a topic of conversation that, there you go.
You know, it's amazing what we think we have to do sometimes and what crutches or tools we need to get done so that we can do it. And I think that's an interesting revelation to go full circle and go, I took this, I think I did better, and then you're told by a doctor that probably didn't even put a dent in it. So
No.
that's rather revealing.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm happy for this conversation to come up. I love the transparency. I love the honesty. But anyone that's watching, none of us are medical doctors.
No,
And
you're right. Absolutely.
go to medical doctors and talk about this if it's something you want to go down the journey on. But it is prevalent in the society. But we're not advocating for it unless a doctor tells you that.
Absolutely.
So just
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't mean to infer that.
No, it's okay. No, I didn't say that you were. I just wanted to make that crystal clear for everyone watching it. All right, Celeste or Jody?
Jody, about working with nerves.
Well, I can take points from both Marty and Celeste. Just dealing with performance anxiety. There's so many things that have been written and said about this. I will just say that you have to find something that will work for you. And I've tried what I think has been just about everything. And what I've come to realize over these years is that you have to find something that works for you and trust it. Trust your preparation. And I think this idea of what Celeste is talking about with Don Green is an external focus of attention. If any of you know what I've been doing in the last 3 years with external focus of attention and playing, getting just off the face, away from the face and on the music, this ties into this, I think. I've done some of the Don Green exercises. They were very helpful. And as a matter of fact, Bill Williams played several years in Santa Fe as principal trumpet. He's a beautiful trumpet player, and actually Michael Stern had him come in and play Mahler 5 one year. He just had Bill come in when we were kind of in between, before Julian got here for our principal trumpet player in the Kansas City Symphony, our wonderful principal trumpet player that we have now. Kind of in the interim there, Bill came in and played Mahler 5. It was fabulous. It was fabulous. Anyway, so I would trust what Bill says. But I think what has been helpful to me has been not to, if you feel a little bit nervous, not to fight it, like to say, I have to get rid of it. It has to be gone. But to rather say, okay, here's my old friend. Here we are. And you're here now. You're here too, but I can still do everything I do. And you're in the room also. But I'm going to trust what I've done. I know what works. I know what works with my airflow. And I'm going to play what I hear, to get back to what Celeste says. Because at the audition, you don't want to be thinking about, with maybe just an occasional exception, like Marty was referring to on a rhythm or something. You've got to make sure you get right. You don't want to be thinking about, am I playing everything right? You don't even want to be thinking, am I playing in tune? You just want to have this great sound in your ear, and you're playing what you hear. If you can hear it, we've all heard, if you can hear it, you can play it, right? But to put your attention externally on that. And then if you feel a little nervous, okay. I remember playing on Heldenleben with the Kansas City Symphony once. I was just sitting there on second trombone, but when the battle scene starts, it was just exciting music. And I was sitting there counting my rests, getting ready to come in on the big trombone licks, and my heart was going boom, 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 boom. And I go, well, that's just excitement sometimes too. So I just said, well, okay, but everything I do to play is still working. And so don't try to fight it like it's got to be gone or I can't function. Just try to work with it. And I think having this external focus of attention is really, really helpful. And trust your preparation. Trust yourself. You're ready to go, and trust that. Trust that your face is working. Trust that the air is working. And try not to focus on little things like that are internally or physical.
My high school oboe teacher would always say, if you get nervous, it just means you care. Because if you didn't care at all, you wouldn't be nervous.
Do you all have any like tricks though to get yourself, when you're not in that situation, to get your body physically to feel that way? I've heard all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Like get on a treadmill and run and get your heart rate and try to play the excerpt. I mean, do you have anything beside, I know that people say go play for people, but do you have anything you've done to get your body to be at least close to that feeling?
Yes.
Go ahead, Celeste. Go ahead.
Well, Bill Williams had me go up several flights of stairs and then play a mock audition.
Right.
So, and then go up several flights of stairs and then wait in the hallway while my oboe got cold, my reed got dry. And then you come in and you cannot play a warm-up note and you play an audition. Stay mentally focused that whole time. So that was something that he had me doing in the preparation for taking auditions.
Kind of segues into our next question, which are pre-routines. I was judging a piano concerto competition one time, and here in Kansas City for, doesn't matter for what, and it was 1 billion pianists, and we got into the final 3, and it was going to be, the auditions were playing a concerti, and then we were going to choose a winner, and they were all in full concert garb, and this happened to be someone that was wearing a tuxedo, and they announced their name, and then they went down the aisle, literally got next to the piano and did 100 push-ups. And I just remember going, this is wild. And then they got up and played, and it was like, and then I asked them afterwards and said, my teacher makes me do that because, and I said, well, do they ask you to do that on stage? Or are you supposed to off of stage? Anyway, it was just very interesting, but obviously that was that person's pre-routine that they, for whatever reason, I witnessed, and I was just taken aback by it. Do you all have anything pre-day of, pre-routines, like getting ready for these things to get your mind in the right place?
I mean, it really, after a while, the familiarity was, you don't try to, for me, if you feel like you guys were saying, if you feel like you're ready to go, locked and loaded, keep it simple. Don't get desperate. Don't look for a magic cure. Don't try to think it's going to be perfect. Like Jody says, fear is in the room. You don't want to be fearless. You want to be fearful and walk through it. It's part of there. You need to live with that and then play in spite of that. That's part of your motivation. You know what I mean? And so it's really a question on the day of. The other thing that happens a lot of times on the day of, you practice too much. The day before you're desperate, so you practice too much, and then the next day you're sort of not great. So I always tell my people, like on the day of an audition, okay, make sure that you do your practice as hard as you want, but the day before it should be a reasonably light day, not heavy, because especially for a brass player, your chops are like, whoa, well, I practice a lot. Well, you over practice, but you give a day in between that makes a big difference. And the thing is, just don't. Especially at the audition, for instance, really important. How many times you say you got to show up at 10 o'clock and they're going to pick numbers or whatever, that kind of routine. And that's always fun. So you get number, 25. Oh, great. I'm here at 10 o'clock. I don't play till 2. The worst thing you can do is sit in the room and overreact, touch the excerpts, and keep warming up. Put your horn down, come back at appropriate time, maybe play a little bit to calm your nerves, go out and come back at appropriate time, warm up a little bit, touch things, and then be ready to go. Don't sit there and stew and pick at things. Keep testing it until you fail. Don't do that on the day of or the day before, so maybe that'll help.
Yeah, I agree. And lots of times that works out really well because you have to travel the day before anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And we get all nervous because we didn't play, but that's fine, And actually, Celeste, I did one time, I took an audition where we were in this old house. We warmed up in the basement. I did have to run up 3 flights of stairs to the attic where I played my audition. And I had about maybe 1 minute while the guy in front of me played. And then I had to run in, and then I literally was, it wasn't nerves. I was just like, I'd run up 3 flights of stairs. So that was weird. I would just say, also kind of establish what makes you feel good as a human being as far regard to sleep and exercise and what you eat and caffeine level or lack thereof. If you have a cup of coffee or every day of your life, don't just stop the day of the audition. You'll probably have a raging headache for one thing, but kind of do something similar, and if you all of a sudden decide to have a kale smoothie the day of your audition, if you've never had kale in your life, it's not going to help you that much that day, probably. But kind of go with with a general routine, and then just be aware that weird things happen. Something unexpected might happen, and try to do something, whether it's to meditate or walk around the block, like Marty said, get out of the room, and do that to wind down a little bit, because some weird thing can happen. That you despite your best plans, cab driver took you in the wrong place. Now you've got to get there and you're short on time or whatever. Might want to warm up in your room a little bit ahead of time or something like that. I'll tell you one other weird thing that happened to me in an audition once. It was in the actual audition. I was in the finals of a job for lyric opera in Chicago, and it was the finals, so the screen was down. The conductor was leaning over the piano. We all had to play the Rimsky-Korsakov concerto. And he was leaning over and I just brought my horn up. There were 6 of us left standing, and I was in there. I was just bringing my horn up, just got ready to play Bolero, had the P flat in my head. I had it. And he sang it just as I started to play. He was 6 feet away from me. And, I just had to keep going. It was a huge distraction, but I just had to keep going. Anyway, that was a weird thing. But anyway, just try to go with the flow, and try not to get too upset if some little thing does happen out of your perfect routine that you've set up for yourself. And I will say something to the young students here. If you're in high school or middle school or high school, and you're at music contest, or you're at contest, some sort of an audition for district, or even you're at solo and ensemble contest, and you're all in the gym warming up, not now with COVID, but under normal circumstances, you're going to hear some people in there playing your same audition material, and they're going to be in there hot dogging it. And and you're going to hear them play 6 high B flats, and you're going, man, I've only got 1 high B flat. Well, maybe you save that 1 high B flat for when you're in the audition room, because people who are hot dogging it in the gym and showing off usually aren't the ones who do the best anyway. They're shot by the time they go in there. So you do what you plan to do to warm up, and then get out of there or something, and then just show up at your audition time and play. Leave your best stuff for the audition, not the gym.
Yeah, I think the same thing, Jody, about that was really helpful to me to recognize that, these other people play really well, but suddenly I had this realization one day, that doesn't make me bad. Just because someone's over there playing their high notes or their fast excerpts or their fast etudes really, really well, it doesn't make me suddenly instantaneously worse than I was before I walked into that room. And so just focusing inward on yourself and what you're doing. And then my other point that I wanted to make about this concept is just that you want to make sure that you are focused. It's not social time. When you get on the audition circuit, you will get to know all the people on the audition circuit. You went to festivals with them, you went to summer camp with them, you went to school with them, you had one of the same teachers, you know each other, or you've all been, I saw you at the last audition or whatever. And so it's nice to catch up with people and talk shop, but maybe save it for after the audition. Focus on the audition first. Stick to yourself, because your audition depends on it, and that your focused mind, rather than, I just heard from so-and-so and whatever they're doing, just focusing on the audition, not the other people around you until it's over.
So let's think about the advice you've given about nerves, how to prepare for the day, the night before. We've actually hit a lot of the subjects that our students have sent. Do you prepare any differently, or do you help your students prepare any differently when they're thinking they have to record an audition versus the live audition? Is there a different preparation mindset in that? Marty?
Yeah, I think there is, especially nowadays. But it depends if they want if it's just audio or video too, and do they insist that it be a one pass? And those are all 3 totally different things. If it's the worst case scenario, which is video one pass, you have to be able to hopefully it's reasonable amount of material. Normally that is, because if someone's doing that, they're going to get a lot of applications, and you're not going to sit there and listen to 8 excerpts. No committee is going to listen to 50 or 60, 80 of that. Nobody. They only want to I want 4 or 5 excerpts where I can tell everything quickly. You know, so make sure that as a student, if you have to do this and record it, make sure that you obviously learn the pieces and then practice just going through all of them at some point. Even if they're not perfect, keep on going. You know, don't stop. If it's one of those things, you've got to learn to do all 5 in a row. And eventually go back, fix what needs to be fixed, then do it again. And the more, especially if a lot of times those kind of little pre-recorded things are not that strenuous. It's not as bad as working up an entire list, and even for a real audition, you know what I mean? So a lot of times. Now, so usually they'll have something high or something a little tricky, but if you can get to the point where you can 3 or 4 times a day play through that little thing top to bottom without stopping, regardless of mistakes or not, obviously you don't want mistakes, then you're going to get there quicker. Then now if it's edited or you get a chance to drop in individual excerpts, well, you can choose that until the cows come home, you know what I mean? So it really depends. The technology nowadays has worked a double-edged sword for our preparation and our presentation of what we are.
Yeah,
so,
I imagine in light of what we've just experienced since March, this may be more prevalent. Jody, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of competitions and things are going to this no editing thing, like the International Trombone Association, all the competitions, if they suspect you've edited, you know, you're out, you know. So I would just say that if it's a recorded audition and you have the opportunity to play several takes, usually what happens, if you're really well prepared, is you get your best take in the first 2 or 3 times anyway. It's not going to be the 12th time that you get your best one usually. You know, you can kind of keep that in mind. And I would say when you practice and when you're just doing your everyday practice, be in the habit of just recording yourself. Like, you might get a great take of something. Gee, I wish you could use that. Of course, you want your recording to be consistent, like it sounds like it's been done in the same room at the same time. But I'll just say, you know, if there is a recorded round, it's usually going to be followed by a live round fairly soon thereafter. So you still need to prepare as if you're going to do a live audition and not have 12 times to go through it. So just keep that in mind.
No, that's that. I think, again, I think we're about to see some change in our profession, but I imagine that there is no excuse anymore to not be able to record yourself well, you know, and be prepared with that. Celeste, any experience with that on your end?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is to start early, because sometimes you record yourself and you go, oh, I didn't notice my C's were so flat. And you hear it in the recording, and if you don't have time to make another recording, well, you're kind of stuck. And then you feel bad about the recording you're putting forward because you didn't even notice when you were practicing that your C's were flat. Or sometimes I've recorded things, and when I was making a recording 2 years ago, I stopped in a piece, and I said to my collaborators, I said, oh, I'm really sorry, my read is so bad, I have to stop, and we have to change. And then I listened to that take, and it was really a great take. It was the best one, and I had stopped. And I was like, oh, if only I just kept playing on that bad read, it would have been fine. So, you know, just sort of, even if you feel like it's not going well, finish the take, finish your list, finish your recording, and then go back and listen. And do it well enough in advance that if you need to redo it, you still have a week or 2 to make that recording again.
That's the same piece of advice we got from our panel that was recording with a critical ear. Just keep going. And they said one of the most rookie mistakes people make is they bail because they think they did something wrong.
right.
Yeah, and it's not audible.
Right.
And a lot of times too, the mistakes that you think were catastrophic, when you listen back, it's not a big deal. And a lot of times it's, as we all of us know on the screen, you can hear a mistake and you can tell that was a mistake, that was an anomaly, or is that in the fabric of the playing? And that's a huge difference. Everybody's human, but if you realize that person just doesn't have a good tone and they don't have a high register or whatever, or that mistake happened 2 times, then they know that's endemic. So
You're talking about me?
yeah, we want perfection, but
You talk about me again?
no, not particularly.
All
No.
right.
Okay.
When I was getting ready to, after I'd been at my previous institution before this, I had lunch with somebody and I said, all right, what do I need to do? Those of you that are watching, it was actually Robert Reynolds. And I said, all right, I'm getting ready to go onto the audition circuit, I think. And there's a job that I'm interested in. And he said, start videotaping yourself every single day, because you never know when that magic's going to happen. Never, and all they need is 10 minutes. And some days, if you try to fabricate 10 minutes, it's not going to be authentic. And there's going to be a day that you're going to walk out after recording that, and you're going to go, that was it. The ensemble grew, they sounded better, it was improved. And literally, I'll say the story here. I sent a tape to UMKC's audition that I had been recording for months, seemingly. And it was a Friday afternoon. I was in jeans and a casual shirt, and it was the most difference that I had shown in a rehearsal. That's what I sent. And I got feedback when I got here that many people enjoyed that recording. But there were many that weren't nearly that good, that if I would have been pressured to do it that day, that I would have. And so the same thing applies here. Record yourself often, and you never know when you might hit that magic. So
record dress rehearsals too, of like recitals. Record the dress rehearsal too, because it might go better than the recital. And then you have a great recording, you have great takes of your solo rep as well. So don't just record the performance, but record the dress rehearsal. I've had students do that for competitions, that if they have the rep for the competition on the recital, we'll record the dress rehearsal because that might go better.
That's right. The last, I'm looking down these questions. I think we've almost covered all of them, and we're hitting about an hour anyway. So this, I think, is a good time for you all to offer your final words of wisdom and any advice that you want to give these amazing students and people that are watching online. So, Marty, you want to go first? Any final
Yeah,
words?
I mean, I think to sum it up, if you just listen to all our comments and all our thoughts, it's be patient with time and be patient with yourselves. And those are two different things, because we can be incredibly impatient within compacted time on a daily basis, and other times laissez-faire. But for auditions, like we've all said, this is a long-term investment, not a particularly nice investment that we enjoy out of our music, but it's a necessary one most of the time. So get used to that and don't fight it. You know, it's a discipline, and we learn to do it better and better as time goes on. But come to realization like, okay, this is a noisome thing about having to play my instrument, but I'm going to make it palatable the best way I can and mature with this noisome meal on a daily basis. So, but even the younger students, especially at the university level, who are going into auditions and they want to be a performer, it's really important that you come around this mentality. Talk to other people that have been there, talk to other teachers, but don't ignore it, and don't think like, if I just practice, I'll do it. No, there's always going to be something. So just get used to the concept of how to work with this, with all the tools we've already talked about.
Celeste?
I think my best advice would be to try to find a way to embrace the process, because about 97% of what we do is the process. About 3% of it is the performance, the audition, and all of the work is the process. And I wish if I could tell my 18-year-old self something, it would be, number one, it's going to be okay. Number two, try to enjoy the process, and still you have to work hard and you have to apply yourself and you need to focus and you need goals. But most of it's the process, so try to embrace that part of it, because it's most of what you'll spend your time doing.
Jody?
Give yourself the opportunity to make this incremental progress, and try not to be overwhelmed, but make some progress every day on something. And just ask yourself at the end of the day, did I make some progress on something? It might be one slur from one note to the other, you know, and on a certain day. I find it very helpful to approach my practice and my playing as an observer rather than a judge. So, I mean, just observe and try to give yourself some helpful criticism, as you would give a student that you are listening to. You know, do that for yourself. And then just do everything you can to develop your ear and how you hear music, so that you have a really good mental image of what you want to sound like. because sometimes it's just as easy as, oh, I just need to hear how I want this to go. And sometimes that can be an oversimplification, but many times it's not. Yeah.
As I reflect on all the wisdom you gave our students and all the fortunate people that get to hear and see this, I've heard all of you perform in multiple different venues, and when I watch and hear, I'm inspired. But I also realize that you're in performance, not in audition. And I think the wisdom that you all brought to bear is that, yeah, we get nervous for performances, but that the audition process is a necessity in our profession. It is part of putting ourselves under a microscope to have people make an assessment. And that's always hard to be that vulnerable. I don't feel like an audition is giving a gift, whereas when you are performing for people, you are providing a gift to the people in the audience. So I'm trying to draw the connection to the fact that I am delighted that you are the gifts of our students here. I mean, all of you are world-class performers that have dedicated your lives to teaching and the betterment of this world of making music. And I can't thank you enough for the time that you've taken to jump on a Zoom call to talk to our students who have been really thoughtful through this process, and they have really grown. And they see us at our destination or where we are now, and they don't hear the journey. So having you all share these perspectives are just remarkable testaments to why we love you. I mean, we are delighted, and I know I speak for Steve, how much we appreciate you. So that's from me. I want to say thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve as we wrap.
I have no idea what I can add from those beautiful words that Joe just said, except that I agree with all of them. One of the great joys about being at this school is that part of the hiring process is what kind of people are they? And these people are all humble, steadfast, relentless, kind, driven, and 12,000 other beautiful adjectives that we could use to describe them. I know that I speak for Joe on this, that we get to stand with our students in performance, that these people mentor. And if that's freeing for Joe and I, because we don't have to worry about a lot of the things that we know that they're being given by these. I want to say thank you. I don't get to say that enough to our applied faculty. It means to have you all on our team and in our school for our kids, which is the reason we're all here. So if you're watching this online and you have a chance to see Celeste, Jody, or Marty, get in their clinics, go sit on the front row, listen to their students, because you see the wisdom that they're being given. And I'm sure if you called them and asked them if you're younger and you want to talk about, studying with them or working with them, I know all three of these people. I can't imagine that they would say anything other than enthusiastic. Yeah, let's get together and figure out what your future might be. This is only one of 2 Zooms of our 11 that are all UMKC faculty and people. So we wanted to bring some variety as well. But just know that there's 100 faculty like this at this school. So we're humbled that you're spending time, and we're thankful. We wish you nothing but the best. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you'll come back next week for our next session. And I wish you nothing but the best. I know I speak for everyone here, but thanks to everyone for coming today. We wish you nothing but the best.